Hello everyone, bringing you the Mannequin of the Month for March 2022 today. As ever, the topic for this was chosen via a poll over on Patreon, and the topic that was the top of the poll this month was a British infantryman in Burma in 1944, and that's what we're going to have a look at here. Now, the kit and equipment here is largely of Indian manufacture, and obviously tropical uniform at this time period was by and large manufactured out in India for the campaign out in the Far East. However, we'll start at the top as we normally do, and we actually have a British-made item here, which is a rather battered example of the slouch hat. Not only an Australian thing, a lot of people assume, and certainly have actually seen comments on videos saying, mentioning Australian troops when it's actually Brits serving out in Burma. The slouch hat was a standard piece of headgear. The helmet was worn as well, the Mark II steel helmet, but in this instance we have the slouch hat. And as I say, a rather battered example that's clearly seen quite a bit of service. It just has a tape around the base of the crown rather than the puggaree. And this is basically how they came, and then a puggaree could be added, but often wasn't. So we have that there. Obviously worn with the brim down. This does have a press stud to allow the brim to be fastened up on the left-hand side, but worn with the brim down here, which gives better protection from the sun, of course. The basic uniform consists of something which had been introduced in the mid-war years, which was an improved tropical uniform, both in a khaki colour and in green, as we have here, the jungle green, for use in jungle environments. And that was a version of the British Army's battle dress, but made in cotton. So the trousers made in cotton drill, and the blouse here made in cotton cellular material, commercially referred to as Airtex, or the trade name being Airtex. It's a cellular material which is breathable, not particularly hard wearing. The blouse, which we have here, was not particularly popular. It does follow the form of a battle dress blouse, 2 chest pockets, and then it's obviously high-waisted and has a buckled waist strap on it as well. One of the biggest problems with these is they tended to ride up, and they can button onto the trousers, but they nevertheless tended to ruck up at the front. So longer garments were preferred, the bush jacket, which was introduced later for this uniform, and also the wool shirt, the Angola wool shirt, which was very popular with British troops out in the Far East. But in this instance, we do have the battle dress blouse from that jungle green battle dress uniform. As I say, made of cellular material. It also has coconut husk buttons, coconut shell buttons rather. This is one example of the natural materials that were used to manufacture buttons out in India for military clothing. The web equipment is 1937 pattern, of course. This is Indian made 1937 pattern, so it's of standard form, but there are some eccentricities to the manufacture. You sometimes find that certain buckles don't fit. The brass ends on a strap won't fit through a buckle, or some of the fittings are a bit rough, some of the manufacturing is a bit rough, but it does the job. I believe the pouches are manufactured by Bata, which is a big shoe factory out in India. The Bata company being an international company, but they had a factory out in India which also made web equipment, and you also see various different equipment factories manufacturing components for the web equipment as well. At the front we have 2 basic pouches, obviously carrying the standard sort of things they'd be expected to carry: ammunition for the rifle, Bren gun magazines, possibly grenades, etc. The belt at the front there, it's all standard form, and you have the L straps from the haversack coming down over the shoulder here, hooking into the top of the pouches. So obviously the haversack's being carried on the back. We'll have a look at that in just a moment. We'll start moving this around now and have a look at some of the other details of the kit and equipment that's carried. Looking at the right hand side of the mannequin here, you can see the sleeve of the battle dress blouse has been rolled up. Down on the belt we have here a British machete in its leather sheath there, hanging from the belt. Very common for men to carry machetes when involved in jungle operations, obviously a very useful thing to have. The battle dress blouse does have an epaulette up on the shoulder here, and you can see the side profile of the slouch hat there with the 2 eyelets worked in for ventilation there. You can also see the side profile of the haversack on the back as well. Moving this round to look at the back of the equipment here, you can see the haversack carried on the back with a relatively light load in this instance. Various things could be added to the equipment here if need be. You might see the monsoon cape rolled up and carried on the back of the belt, shovels, various different bits and pieces, picks, depending on the specific operation. This is a fairly basic setup we have here. The water bottle, which is a standard enamel water bottle in its felt cover, is carried in an Indian-made carrier. You'll notice this fastens over the shoulder of the bottle with a buckle here, rather than with hopefully you can see that, it fastens with a buckle here rather than with a press stud on the shoulder of the bottle there. And that's carried round on the rear of the equipment. It's a comfortable place to carry it. It's a little bit more balanced that way when you're not carrying an entrenching tool to the rear there. And it's very common to see in photographs of men serving out in Burma in 44 and 45, to see it round on the back of the equipment there. It also frees up this hip to carry the machete. You sometimes see the machete carried on the other hip. It makes it easier to draw there with a cross draw, but it does make the equipment less balanced, so that's carried round on the right hip in this instance. That's the back of the equipment there. And looking at the left hand side of the equipment here, we can see the bayonet for the rifle is carried, and this indicates the man is still carrying the rifle number 1 Mark III Star, the short magazine Lee Enfield as it was formerly known. But we have here a shortened bayonet. Now this is an Indian pattern bayonet. The blade is significantly shorter. It's essentially otherwise very similar in form to the standard 1907 sword bayonet, but it does have that shorter blade, which makes it a little bit more suitable for fighting in close country, in jungle conditions. And obviously it doesn't hang down quite as low below the belt as well, which is also a plus. So you have an Indian pattern bayonet there for the rifle number 1 Mark III Star, carried in a standard Indian-made 1937 pattern bayonet frog. This has actually had a large hole worked into the top loop in order to carry a number 4 spike bayonet at some point in its life. Very crudely done there, rather frayed because of that, but in this instance obviously carrying the Indian bayonet for the rifle number 1 Mark III Star. So there we are. I hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I say, British infantryman serving in Burma late in 1944, and the kit and equipment, as I say, largely Indian manufacture. There was British kit out there at the time as well, of course. You know, the British web equipment would find its way out there, and potentially web equipment of other manufacturers as well. But the Indian equipment obviously was available much closer to the supply lines, obviously straight from the factory and to being issued out, as opposed to being shipped in from far afield. So Indian web equipment was very, very common. Hopefully you found it interesting looking at this, as I always say. If you have, and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, little notification button down below, and that will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And of course, if you'd like to vote on the topic that's going to be covered each month, there are generally 3 choices. The corporal tier over on Patreon gives that option. And a huge thank you as ever to everybody who supports the channel using those methods. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, where there will of course be photographs of this posted up, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below in the description. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.